Alright, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be bringing you quite a relevant video, very important for today's meta game. We're going to be talking about all about super polymerization, all of the incredible valid targets available right now, various tips with the card, and just generally all types of information about both super polymerization and all its targets. Alright, first of all, let's just read it real quick. Discard one card, fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either player's side of the field as fusion material. Very important. This is very good. First of all, it's a quick play, so you can activate it during your battle phase and during your standby phase. This makes it a very good card. Remember, don't set it, because once you set it during your turn, you can't activate it anymore. But it's very important. Otherwise, it's very good for activating during the standby phase, because you can dodge effects that are very good, that activate during like main phase 1. There's various cards that say stuff like that. Like for example, off the top of my head, Prank Kids cards you have to activate during main phase 1. Just last meta game, you needed to activate the rank up magic card during main phase. So there's various cards with that sort of stipulation. Very good to activate this during the standby phases. It interrupts them. Secondly, cards and effects cannot be activated in response to this card's activation. That is by far one of the best things about this card, is that your opponent can't respond. They can't negate it. They can't do anything about it. If they have a field with 8 negates on it, they cannot respond to super polymerization. That's something that makes this card incredibly good. Next, we've got these various cards that make this card even better, make super polymerization even better. We'll talk about it as we go through this. All right, first up, we've got Thunder Dragon Colossus. Thunder Dragon Colossus is an incredibly useful card using against Thunder Dragons, and so is the Titan and Colossus. Titan in theory is better because it takes out more targets, but the problem with Titan is sometimes they won't have an end board with that many copies of Colossus. They'll have maybe like 1 to 2 Colossus, and then this card's kind of a dead card. So in that regard, it might be better for interruption. And then Thunder Dragon Colossus is another card that is very good. It does have more specific requirements, as you can see there. But what is very good about this card is that, again, it can interrupt during your opponent's turn. So maybe they have like 1 copy of Thunder Dragon, 1 copy of Battery Man Solar, for example, and it can interrupt them while they're trying to build their board, which is also very good. And then it summons this monster, and they can't even activate effects in response. They can't even search anymore, because you've locked them out of searching with their own archetype. Next, we've got Salome Violent Chimera. Very good on both ends in terms of dealing with Salamangreats. It's very good because going second against Salamangreats, they usually end on a field of a Phalanx, a Sunlight Wolf, and usually two set trap cards, and then maybe like something else that is, again, it's something that varies. So what's good about this card is that it has the ability, and this will come back again in usefulness. I'll just talk about it one more time. You have player priority, so you can always activate effects first. So during your standby phase, you can activate this before your opponent can activate Artifact Sanctum, which is very good. During your turn, you can activate it before they can. So let's say your opponent ends and their field is Artifact Sanctum, and then Salamangreat Roar, and the other Salamangreat card that pops cards, and a Phalanx, and a Salamangreat, what is it called? Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf, for example. You go into standby phase. As soon as standby phase hits, you have player priority. Activate super polymerization, fuse away their 2 Salamangreat cards, and special summon your own Violent Chimera. And now your opponent missed the timing on everything, because they can't activate cards in response to any of this. They can't use Roar against this. They just lose their board, and it's a really good card. It's a blowout card against Salamangreats. So definitely definitely keep this in your extra deck if you're going to use, as long as Salamangreats are meta, it's very good to keep this along with super polymerization in your deck. Next, we've got Mud Dragon of the Swamp. Mud Dragon of the Swamp is quite interesting because it takes 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So just off the top of my head, an example that I can come up with is the various Thunder Dragon boards, where they have a bunch of dark monsters with different types. Maybe they have a Thunder, maybe they have a Dragon, good things like that. It's a little more versatile than just playing this, because this only gets rid of Thunder Dragons. But let's say they have a Red Dragon Abyss and they have a Colossus. You can get rid of both of them because they're different types, but they're the same. They're the same attribute, but they're different types, which is very good. It's also very good against various decks during both players' turn. These 2 are some of the best cards against the current Dark Monster boards and interruption. So it's good against something like Orcus. That's good against something like Thunder Dragon. Basically, you know, they create this large field of monsters, and you can get rid of 2 dark monsters with Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. It's very good against Thunder Dragons, for example, because you fusion summon this. This card gains the attack of one of your opponent's special summon monsters, and then you can target one monster. You can copy their effects, which is really good. Like, for example, you can stop your opponents from searching with Colossus because you target a Colossus and then steal their effect. And then if this fusion summoned card is destroyed, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. All special summoned monsters your opponent controls. So this, if you don't break your opponent's board using Super Polymerization, this card will, without certainty, finish the job. Very good card. Next, and then we've also got Predaplant Draco Stapelia, which is also a very good card. It gets rid of 1 fusion monster and 1 dark monster, good against specifically Thunder Dragons, but also, honestly, it's not that bad against Salome because if you're playing a dark deck yourself and you're playing the Super Polymerization during your opponent's turn, let's say they're trying to OTK you with Violent Chimera, you just fuse away their Violent Chimera, and then during the battle phase and one of your own dark monsters, for example, or if you have for example the Layer of Darkness on the field and everything's dark, then you can fuse away multiple dark monsters. And again, with this coming back to 2, it makes Layer of Darkness so much better, so much more consistent, because they can easily fuse away your opponent's field to summon stuff like this, and then afterwards whatever you summon you use for a virus like Eradicator virus, and then whatever spawn trap cards they have are definitely gone too. Like you can obliterate your opponent, like seriously ruin their lives for the next 3 turns. Like it's kind of insane. Next we've got the Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, good against pendulums. You fuse away their copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon and a pendulum monster they have on the field. Good for interruption and for going second. Next we've got the Metalfoes Crimsonite, also a very good card against pendulums because you fuse away their heavy Metalfoes Electromite and then 2 of their monsters. Good because you have to keep in mind most of the time pendulum players will try to keep that copy of heavy Metalfoes Electromite on the field, because if it manages to survive, they can use it again during the next turn. So they want it to survive, they want to be able to use it later. This card is very good against all types of pendulum builds that use him, and virtually every pendulum deck uses Heavy Foes Electromite. He's one of the best cards printed for that. Next we've got 2 various copies of Cyber Dragon outs. You have to be careful. There are other Cyber Dragon cards that people think you can use. You cannot use those. There are some Cyber Dragon fusion monsters that say specifically you have to contact fuse. You cannot use those, but you can use these 2. This one is just straight up insane against them because it requires 1 Cyber Dragon and 1+ machine monsters. So you can literally fuse away their entire field. You can get rid of everything. That's how good it is. It's usually, they always want to go second, so you set the Super Polymerization face down and you go, oh yeah, your turn, and then you activate it, and they cannot even respond with Cyber Dragon Infinity. They can't negate this. So really good against Cyber Dragons. Next is First of the Dragon. This card has multiple uses. First of all, fuse away normal monsters. So if certain decks use normal monsters, stuff like Blue Eyes, Phantasm Spiral, stuff like that. But more importantly, all tokens in Yu-Gi-Oh are considered normal monsters. You have to keep that in mind. So if your opponent activates Scapegoat, 2 of those is basically this monster. If your opponent activates a monster like Phantom Skyblaster to summon tokens, cool. They summon the tokens, you get this out. And this card is very good. This card is very good. First of the Dragons is very good against decks that do not use spell and trap card removal, because this card is unaffected by monster effects. So just totally unaffected. It's not activated effects, nothing like that. It is unaffected by monster effects. Monsters cannot do anything to this. And then on top of that, it cannot be destroyed by battle except by a normal monster, which is just nuts. So if you play it against something like Sekka's Light Mermills or Sekka's Light Thunder Dragons or Sekka's Light, Burning Abyss, this card is virtually an auto win, because you just put this on the field As soon as you see an opening where you can do even 100 damage to your opponent, you just attack with one of your other monsters, and that's it. And your opponent, they cannot do anything. They cannot make up the damage as long as this card sits on the field, which is kind of insane. So definitely a very interesting target. Here's another one, Sea Monster Theseus. Not that good going second because not a lot of boards are left with multiple tuner monsters, but good for interruption. We've got Draco and Necro Nether Soul Dragon. This card is far better because of the zombie world, and I think this Super Polymerization to 2 actually makes both this card and the zombie world far more interesting. You definitely want to run Super Polymerization in zombie world. Zombie world can break boards even easier now because before they had access to stuff like Rivalry of the Warlords, which is a very good card because it makes everything zombies, and then your opponent can't even summon out of their hand because they don't have zombies in their hand, which is kind of nuts. But yeah, it definitely makes that a far more interesting deck. But you can activate this and then basically fuse away your opponent's anything. Like they can, no matter what cards they have, you can fuse them away because you can fuse away basically any 2 cards because everything becomes a zombie. This card's effect is decent. It's not the greatest effect during Link format, but I'd say it's certainly not bad. It basically summons an extra token and puts additional damage on the board, but it's certainly not an amazing effect, but it's very good considering that you're getting this off of getting rid of a bunch of your opponent's monsters. Next we've got Prank Kids Weather Washer. This is, you have to be very careful with how you use this against Prank Kids. It is very good against Prank Kids. Usually you want to use it against either their Link monster, which is the Rip Roarin, or their I forget the fusion, their biggest fusion, their largest fusion. But you want to use this against their Link monsters or their fusion monsters. Don't use this against their regular monsters. But this card is definitely very good against them because it gets rid of their field advantage, but additionally they have quick effects that they can activate where they tribute themselves, but they can't respond with those quick effects because you can't respond to Super Polymerization, which makes the card again just crazy because you can get rid of those pesky cards with quick effects just by fusing them away. But definitely a very good card if you have Prank Kids in your local meta. Invoked Mechama, Invoked just won recently. Invoked what are they called? Invoke Mech Knights just topped several events recently, so this is very good to have. You can use your opponent's own Alistair the Invoker and one of their light monsters. I believe their Link monster counts as Alistair the Invoker, so you can get rid of their Alistair, their Link monster. I forget his name, but the Invoker of Madness. You can get rid of Invoker of Madness and one of their light monsters like a Mechaba, and you know, I mean, what are they going to do at that point? You can't negate it. They can't negate it with their own Mechaba because again, can't respond. Invoked Purgatorio, that, you know, it goes into it. Trishal is a card that is not out in the meta yet. You have to, this is coming out later. I don't know when it's coming out, but it's very good. All it requires is 3 monsters with different names, and then if those 3 monsters are all dragons, then it gains an additional effect. But I mean, that's irrelevant because, you know, the odds of them being all dragons is virtually impossible. But this card is very good. It gets rid of 3 monsters with different names. That is so generic. It can literally be anything. It's basically like a raw sphere mode, but you don't have to deal with the actual raw sphere mode on their side of the field. Totally crazy. So definitely a very good card. When it comes out, I would say this is probably the best Super Polymerization target. Infernoid Tierra. This is a more obscure sort of thing, but it's very devastating if it does go through. It's very devastating against them if you manage to do it. But it's, you know, it's very devastating against them. But like I said, yeah, it's, if someone in your meta is playing Infernoids, then I'd say yeah, go ahead. But usually I'd leave this one out. This whole bottom row is significantly worse than the top row. The top row are more the better cards, but you know, this is more options. Next we've got El Shaddai Construct, and I've got El Shaddai Window somewhere over here. These are both very good if you are playing Shaddais yourself. It lets you take your opponent's monsters. Both very good. Lunalight Cat Dancer. This deck won a YCS like about 2 months ago. I don't think it's going to be winning any YCSs because of various hits that it's taken in terms of its going first board. But Lunalight Cat Dancer is the best target to get rid of theirs if you have a friend that plays it. Usually they want to go second, so they'll let you go first. You set the Super Polymerization, they enter battle phase, they'll have a Panther Dancer on their, not Panther Dancer, the Leo Dancer on their side of the field, and maybe like one other card, you fuse them away, and then their battle phase ends and you kill them the next turn. So it's very good against them. If you have someone who plays Photon, this is very good against them. These are the elemental heroes with that fuse with a generic type of attribute. If you're playing them, then use them, but don't try to use this against the elemental heroes, because most of the time, I mean, they're a very rare deck to find nowadays. So most of the time, it's both good. It's good against them and it's good for them, but I would say it's better for them than it is against them. Gravekeepers, if you have someone in your meta that plays Gravekeepers and they're really annoying, then here it is. Diplexer Chimera. This is a very interesting card because. So what's interesting about this card is that you can fuse away your opponent's Cybers monsters. Remember, these are Cybers monsters, right? And a few other decks use Cybers monsters. This is more generic than using this because it doesn't require a Salome Great Monster. So you can use it against other decks that use Cybers monsters. So it's pretty decent in that regard. And also has a pretty cool effect where if you tribute a Cybers monster, which it is a Cybers monster, then Spawn Trap cards cannot be activated during the battle phase, which is good because you can kind of OTK your opponent after fusing their monster away. This is good against. This is good in Destiny Heroes because you can fuse away your opponent's Dark Monster, Destiny Hero Dangerous. This is a very interesting card, Cyber's Clock Dragon, because if you have this Clock Wyvern in your deck, you can literally get rid of a U-Link board. Like if your opponent has 6 link monsters on their side of the field, let's say 7, right? They filled every single spot that they could possibly fill, and they filled both extra deck monster zones. You can fuse away every single card that they have and that one Clock Wyvern. I mean, it's completely destructive. So if U-Links come back into the meta, I think this could be a very interesting card. Gem Knights, Gem Knight FTK is a really annoying deck to deal with, and something like this card, which lets you fuse away 3 Gem Knight monsters, would be very good against them. Of course, you would have to go first to prevent that, but I think it's pretty decent all around. There's also various other cards. There's a Gem Knight monster that requires a Gem Knight and a Rock. That would be even better because it can get rid of their Block Dragon after they give up cards for cost. El Shaddai Window, this goes into the same category as El Shaddai Construct. This card is somewhat interesting. Ultimate Axon Kicker. You get rid of one of your opponent's Psychic Synchro monster and a Psychic monster. If those particular types of qualifications are needed in the meta, I think this could be a very interesting card. But as of right now, with Cyframe Lord Omega at 1, I don't know if this card's all that usable. Then our last card here is the newest card, which is World Chalice Card Dragon Al Marduk, and it requires just 3 link monsters. Very good against U-Link boards, very good against very heavy link decks. So you can set it, and then during your opponent's turn, just use it at that time while they're trying to link climb or build a board. It's very good in that regard. It's very good for decks that summon 3 link monsters. The only problem is it does require 3 link monsters, so sometimes you'll be fusing your own monsters away, which at that point it's a loss, but definitely a decent card. Can't wait for the Trishal monster to come out. And again, very interesting mixes with the Zombie World and Lair of Darkness because the decks are that much better now. Alright, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.